guys, welcome back to, lesson 49, Luke chapter 5. You know, it's crazy to me how fast that this goes. When you love doing what you're doing, when you love studying into the Word of God. You know, just yesterday in Luke 4, here we are talking about the mission of the Messiah. Think about this. Jesus standing in a synagogue in Nazareth, reciting and reading the scroll that was given to him, Isaiah 61, the first two verses. I mean, to me, how incredible is that? And so here we have this direction of Jesus is going to start walking this out. He's going to start walking out the ministry. And so here you go in verse 1 of Luke 5, you begin to see people are intrigued now about who this Jesus is. This Jesus of Nazareth. No longer is he the childhood boy of Joseph or of Mary or of the brothers and sisters. No, he started to stir and shake the bushes. I think that's fair to say, because he said, today this is fulfilled. In other words, I'm declaring who I am. And people are intrigued. In verse 1, look, it says, as the crowd was pressing in. I mean, if you've ever interacted with any famous people, you know, the paparazzi and all these crew, they just flock to these famous people. You could be in a mall and everybody's heads turn, right? Because there's somebody, quote unquote, famous. Imagine if you're Jesus. The crowd is literally, when I think of the word pressing in, like you're actually pressing in to the point where like you're touching him, you're interacting. Why? Because they want to hear God's word. I think it's a cool picture because he was standing by Lake Gennesaret. Now, Lake Gennesaret, here we have over here, Lake of Gennesaret. Kevin, what's another name for Lake of Gennesaret?
Sea of Galilee.
Sea of Galilee. Jeff, do you know another name?
That's all I know.
Sea of Tiberias. And so here you have the Sea of Galilee, Lake of Gennesaret. The lake, they call it the Lake Gennesaret, obviously is what we see here. So a couple different names. It's a large freshwater lake, okay? Typically, most would say 8 by 13 or 8 by 14. And then you're going to have it's over 690 feet below sea level. This right here serves as a main source of water, obviously, and commerce for all of the Galilee region. I mean, this is a big, hot topic. Like this is, even in today's society in Israel, this is a major deal. And so there's a lot there, but I love this image, probably by far, no questions asked, my favorite place in all of Israel. There's nothing like waking up at 5 in the morning and just walking out. I was going to say walking on the water. That'd be even cooler. But just going for a swim in the Sea of Galilee. Laura and I used to do that. And then I think we took a couple of the guys from Time Revive and we went, and it was a sandstorm, so you couldn't even see in front of you. And so, but there's a lot that has taken place. I mean, think about all of these things that have taken place here. I mean, look, you have the storm in the sea that everybody knows about that story. Obviously, you have home of Mary Magdalene right around here. The Sermon on the Mount was given overlooking the Sea of Galilee. You know, here you have Tabgha and Capernaum. This is Jesus' ministry headquarters. Like this is, remember, constantly we talked about in the Gospel of Mark, where we went back home. So this would be the headquarters here. And then you have the multiplication of the fish and the loaves that took place here. And then remember, Philip was from Bethsaida. So right around here, one of his disciples, the city of Andrew and Peter. Remember the whole pigs? Jesus threw out the demons and they went into the pigs and then they went running into the water. Like this right here is all of where Jesus hung out. It's an awesome place of ministry. Now, at the same time, I'll point out the obvious. Chorazin, right? One of the woe cities that Jesus cursed. You can still go there today and see that it is still cursed. It's crazy. So as Jesus is transitioning from little Jesus growing up, son of Mary and Joseph, to now he is declared he is the fulfillment of Isaiah 61. He is the coming Messiah. He's saying, this is me. I'm going to preach to the poor. I'm going to release the prisoners. I'm going to release the freedom to the captives and those that are in bondage and those that are oppressed. He wants to bring sight to the blind. Like Jesus is saying, I'm going to do this. So in Luke 5, verse 1, as the crowd was pressing in to hear Jesus, he was standing by Lake Gennesaret. And at the lake, it says he saw 2 boats. The fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. All right, if I was to ask you guys, why were they washing their nets? What would this imply? What time of day? What would this imply? What had they been doing?
Fishing.
They were fishing. Genius. Now, why are they washing their nets? Why do you have to? You're absolutely right, Taylor. Why do you have to wash your nets?
They're done for the day.
They're done for the day, and if you don't wash them, they would say that, they dry up, actually, And then, and you have to, they're not washing that, you have to stretch them out so that they don't dry. So they're doing the work, and so what are they implying? They're done for the day, for sure. So they are done for the day. 2 boats, fishermen had left them. They're already not in their boats, right? And then it says this, in verse 3, it says that he got into one of the boats, right? He saw 2 boats. These fishermen are cleaning, and then Jesus just gets into the boats. Hey, thanks, guys, by the way, which belonged to Simon, and then asked him, Simon Peter, to put out a little from the land. Then he sat down and was teaching the crowds from the boat, because what was happening in verse 1? The crowds were pressing in. So one of the ways that Jesus has crowd control is he gets in a boat and then he floats back, right? And then as he floats down, he's sitting down and teaching the crowds from the boat. You know what I love about this? That is the best event ever. Like, no lighting, no sound, no cameras, pure acoustics. I've done this test on the Sea of Galilee. It is the coolest thing. Even if, okay, and this is where we've done this, even if right here, okay, today, like there might be a string of olive trees right here, which that's true. String of olive trees, and then up here on the mount, right? So what we would do is we had a professor, he'd stand here and he would read just like this, with cars driving all the way around, olive trees right here, and we went to the highest point that we could. I could hear him reading at the edge of the sea, no problem.
Because it's a natural amphitheater.
It's a natural amphitheater. Isn't that crazy? And so here you have Jesus sitting on the boat. He doesn't need any of that stuff. And he begins to teach to the crowds. I mean, even if it's 50, 100, 250, 300, all of them can actually begin. And so remember, the one thing is it's customary for teachers to sit down. Kevin, can you go to Luke 4, verse 20? Luke 4, verse 20. Remember last chapter, Jesus is in the synagogue, right? Says he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and then he sat down. When he sat down, everybody was staring at him. This is the Son of Man. He's connecting with his people. Can you go to Matthew 5:1? Obviously, there could be other implications of teaching. You sit down when you teach as well. In Matthew 5, verse 1, the scripture says this. When he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and then what does he do? After he sat down, his disciples came to them. There's something about Jesus sitting down and teaching. And so here, Jesus is teaching to the crowds, and it says this in verse 4. Okay, in verse 4, so let me just put this here, and I love what Wiersbe does this well, along with Daryl Bach, actually. This is Daryl Bach. So right away, Kevin, I think this is just for you here. Just a visual. He has boat time, right? So Jesus, first of all, is having boat time in verses 1 through 3, right? But next thing you know, Jesus has a command. Okay, Jesus' command, okay? In Jesus' command, it says, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water. Remember? What is he talking about? And let down your nets for a catch. What were they just doing? They're sitting off the shore, cleaning their nets. They were done. Okay, we record some of these messages, okay? If the time allows, we'll record many of these in one day. Can you imagine, you guys, if we're all done and we go sit down and the next thing you know, Taylor's like, hey guys, I want you to do 7 more messages. You would be like, no, you're shaking your head because you're like, I'd never say that. Whatever, but just in case you did, all right? So the point is, you pour your heart out, you pour your heart out, you pour your heart out, and Jesus goes, oh, now I want you to trust me. I want you to put your boat out into deep water. So the command was, what? Let's take your boat. Okay, these guys were done, and Jesus says, no, I want you to go into deep water. There's something about that phrase that just sticks with me. Put out into deep water. Let down your nets for a catch. In other words, these are professional fishermen. No offense, Jesus. You're a carpenter's son, right? At this point, you guys, they don't have a whole lot of proof that Jesus knows what he's talking about. I mean, right? So far in the Gospel of Luke. And so Jesus, the carpenter's son in Nazareth, says, hey, professional fishermen, I know you've been doing this work all night, but I want you to go out again and then just drop your nets. Now, this whole net thing, okay, I had to read on this, so I'm not even going to act like I'm a professional fisherman, okay? So John MacArthur, he says this, normally, the fish that were netted in shallow water at night, okay, would migrate during the daylight hours to waters too deep to reach easily with their nets, which is why Peter fished at night. Okay? No doubt Peter thought that, this is what MacArthur says, that Jesus' directive made no sense. But he obeyed anyway. So it went against everything that these fishermen have been doing. What? You want me to go back out during the day? You want me to go into deep water and let my nets down? The fish aren't even here. They're going to be in a different area because this is not where they are. We know this, Jesus. Isn't it funny how we play that game with Jesus sometimes? All of us do. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I haven't seen a breakthrough. Why haven't I seen a move of God in our nation, Jesus? Like, I could play that game. And sometimes in my mind I want to. Like, I want to see a city break out. And Jesus just says, that's why I want you to keep going. No, you don't understand. I'm cleaning my nets right now, Jesus. Like, how many of us in our own lives, we play these scenarios? Would you agree? We have this, it's almost like this, we know better mentality than you do, Jesus. It's crazy. In fact, look what Peter says in verse 5. Master, Simon replied, we've worked hard all night long. And if you didn't notice, we're cleaning our nets, not the fish right now. But I love what he says. It's kind of like he had to get a little complaining in. Right? But at your word, he says, I'll let down the nets. It's cool because when you see Peter's trust, and so here's where I want to put this. So Jesus' command comes in verse 4, right? And then in verse number 3, what I love what Darrell Bach says is that Peter declares his trust, right? And so he says, I'll drop the nets. Peter's trust says, I will let down the nets. It's like this, as one commentator said, it's like a new statement of faith. It's one thing to actually function by faith, but Kevin, can you go to Romans 10, verse 17, please? And I think this is cool. Faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes through the message about Christ. The only way Peter, in my mind, and maybe you guys would disagree, Peter shows faith is he drops the net. Oh, I have faith, Lord, but then he never drops the net. To me, faith always leads to obedience. Faith always leads to dropping the nets. Even though he got his complaining in, right? Like, hey, I've been doing this all night. He still drops the net. In fact, a little bit more controversial, but I think this works. Go to James 2, verse 14. So in Peter's trust, I actually believe he begins this transition from fisherman to believer. In James 2:14, it says, what good is it, my brothers, if somebody says he has faith but does not have work? So the reason that this is a stretch, I think sometimes like what we're talking about here is maybe not necessarily the work of dropping a net, but I want to imply that if you have faith, you will exercise what you believe. And I think this is where I'm going here, is like, I'm not saying this saves you, I'm just saying when you have faith, you're willing to do whatever it takes. In fact, Kevin, go to verse 17. Peter is willing, his trust is willing to drop the net. In the same way, faith, look at this, if it doesn't have works, it's dead by itself. If Peter said, yes, Lord, but then never drops the net, it's dead. Here's the thing I can't figure out about the church. It seems to me we have the faith to drop the net, but we never drop the net. It's like, I'm in, I want to do this, God, I'll go wherever you want me to go, but then we never actually get in the car and go. It seems to me we never actually like pack up and say, I got to do this, or we hold on to our nets. But Jesus, he clearly gives us boat time. He tells us what to do. And what I love what Peter does is he transitions from a professional fisherman to a follower of Christ. He says, okay, I'm gonna drop the nets. I'm gonna put it down. And I think to me, it's just, so what's ridiculous about this? I think this is cool, okay? Warren Wiersbe says this, maybe 7 of the 12 disciples were fishermen. Maybe, okay? Based on John 21, 1 through 3. What are the skills, Kevin, of a fisherman? What are some skills, Taylor, Jeff, Tom? What are just tangible skills that it takes to be a fisherman? What would you say?
I would think knowing where they needed to go.
Okay, so they have to have knowledge, right? So that's kind of a basic. So part of this of being a fisherman is the knowledge part. Anything else you guys would use to describe fishermen?
Not tying.
Not tying. Okay, so can I say skill? Okay, so fisherman skill, you have to know how to tie knots. You have to know how to bait, hook up the stuff, all this. You have to be willing to touch fish. A couple other of the skills that I would add to this, okay, is one is, as Warren Wiersbe says, I think it's fair to say, you have to have some form of courage. Okay, in the Sea of Galilee, for sure, right? We've seen how that swells really quickly, and so you have to have some form of courage to get out on the waters. What about patience and determination? I mean, fishermen have to be extremely patient. Okay, so you have to have, what about, let's just call it out. You have to have a great deal of faith that this is actually going to work. Right? Just like, somewhere in this thing's going to work. Okay, a couple other things. What about fishermen? Like, you got to be willing to work together. How? How do you have to be willing to work together if it's not just a hook, line, and sinker, but the net stuff? Right? Why would you have to work together?
Couldn't get it in the boat by yourself.
Absolutely. Okay, so these are all great characteristics. And then one of the things that I love what Wiersbe says about fishermen, right, is that they have to develop skills fast enough to get the job done quickly and efficiently. Like, you can be bored out of your mind. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, here we go. And then everybody is working together. And so there's this form of flexibility, right? Even though most people don't think of fishermen as flexible, but you have to have this flexibility and adaptability, right? So here's what you have for fishermen, okay? So in this process, because of all these things, this carpenter's son, the Son of Man, comes in and says, hey, I want you to drop the net. And it's kind of cool because in verse 6, look what happens. In verse 6, we know that Peter's trust is in verse 5, but it says this, there's a full catch. Because of Peter's trust, says when they did this in Luke 5, verse 6, they caught a great number of fish and their nets began to tear. Now, we know that they didn't become to tear because they were washing them, so they weren't dried out. They had just started. This full catch, it was an amazing catch. It was a miracle, and it says even in verse 9 that all were amazed. So when you think about, this is crazy to me, okay? So here's your net, okay? Kevin, I'm going to keep drawing the net, right? Okay, it's a long net, right?
I was thinking about, before you moved on, too, that fishermen, once they kind of get into a routine of something that works, they keep going back to it, too.
That's right. So when he says change it up.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
All right, so they drop the net. Here, that's my fish, okay, guys? Okay, and that's a lot of fish, by the way. So it says this, when they did this, they caught a great number of fish. So they didn't quit. They were done. They were done. They were done for the day. Let's go home. Let's get some cornflakes. Let's sit down. Let's put our feet up. Yeah, we'll try it again. But Jesus wanted the fishermen to do it differently at a different time and in his own way and not theirs. And Kevin, can you go to 2 Chronicles 15:7? And I think with this full catch mentality, I think we need to understand that we can't quit. So in 2 Chronicles 15:7, it just says this. But as for you, be strong, don't be discouraged, for your work has a reward. There will come a time when God will honor, I really believe this, your faithfulness, even when it doesn't make sense. Now, God, you don't understand. I fished all night. I don't want to go back out. I don't want to keep doing this. Can you go to Galatians 6, verse 9? Galatians 6, verse 9 says this, so we must not get tired of doing what is good, for we will reap at the proper time if we don't give up. The full catch came because they didn't quit. The full catch came, why? Because they put their trust in Jesus' command. And then I'm even going to go to, you know where I'm going to go to? Because they were spending time with Him in boat time. So do you see this progression? When you spend time with Jesus, He begins to speak to you, and then you can actually speak back. And then what happens? He begins to pour out His blessing. This is a process. And I have to tell you, it's not easy. Because so many of us for 10, 15, 20 years have been plowing the ground and you still haven't seen anything. And he says, do not give up. And in fact, Kevin, can you go Isaiah 50 verse 10? This is a random one. Isaiah 50 verse 10, and I just think of fishermen. I think of it being dark out on the lake of Gennesaret or the Sea of Galilee. And look what this says. Who among you fears the Lord, listening to the voice of his servant? Who among you walks in darkness and has no light? Let him trust in the name of Yahweh. Let him lean on his God. I love this verse because sometimes you feel like you're fishing in the dark. Sometimes you're feeling like, there's nothing out here, but trust in the name of Yahweh. Lean into him and God will respond. I think it's a fair statement though. When God responds, it's almost never our timing. Which is why he wants us to put our trust in him. If you would, in verse 7, this is kind of cool to me. In verse 7 it says, so they signaled to their partners. Why? Because there's a full catch. Right now we would probably say, can't say 100%, but they would signal to the partners James and John, the sons of Zebedee. Hey guys, remember 2 boats. In the other boat to come and help them. Wait, what? I thought we were done. And they came and they filled both boats, 2 boats, so full that both boats that Jesus was in and that James and John was in, and they began to sink. This is a cool picture to me. Not only are James and John business partners with Simon Peter, but I think it's a fair statement, they're also spiritual partners. Because they're working together, God begins to turn the table. And in verse 8, when Simon Peter saw, all of this fish. Well, let me just say this. On the full catch, don't forget to invite others to the boat. In Mindy's context, don't forget to invite others to the table. But here you have what? Peter inviting others into the boat to experience this with Jesus. If you were a spiritual hoarder, you'd never invite anybody to experience the fish. But what I love about what Peter's doing, he says to James and John, hey guys, come on. And Warren Wiersbe says, you guys, the fishermen became channels of blessing to others. So because of their trust in Jesus, because of them spending time with Jesus, they got to bless other people. They got to pour it out onto other people. You guys, it's not meant to keep. Otherwise, if we do, we'll sink. We must give these blessings away. And so finally, when all of this happens, one of the other components that Darrell Bach says is that you begin to see, not only did Peter explain his trust, but now Peter's confession and fear. Because you see, when he saw all the fish at the lake of Gennesaret, it probably felt like he captured them all. It says he fell at Jesus' knees and he says, go away from me. Because I am a sinful man, Lord. You know what he really says? Just depart from me. I don't understand how I am blessed to be in the presence of the Holy One. I'm experiencing the divine power right in front of my feet as they're flopping around. I don't understand this. And so what he does is he actually begins to articulate his shame over his own sin. He had a living encounter with the divine presence in front of him, and because of fish, he recognized his sin. When Peter put his trust in Jesus after spending time with him, when you do that, you recognize really who you are. Kind of makes me think of Isaiah. Can you go to Isaiah 6, verse 5? I know Isaiah wasn't in a boat with a lot of flopping fish, and he didn't have another boat overwhelmed by God's presence, but this is really what Peter's saying. This is what Isaiah is saying. He says, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and live among a people of unclean lips, because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. I really believe that when you experience the presence of God, you begin to see for who we really are. And sometimes the reason people don't ever see that is because we're not spending time in the boat with Jesus. We don't get the opportunity to experience the blessings of the fish because we never started in the boat in the first place. I could give you examples with Moses in Exodus and in Judges. But the reality is that when Peter recognized this, look in verse 9, if you would, Kevin. It says this, for he and all those who with him were amazed at the catch of fish they took. Yeah, you think? And so we're James and John, Zebedee's sons, who are Simon's partners. And don't be afraid, Jesus told Simon. From now on, I'm going to be switching your career. So Peter's confession and fear, you know what it led to? It led to others getting involved. In other words, James and John, from now on, you will be catching people. Isn't that cool? To me, in verse 11, it says, then they brought the boats to the land. They left everything. Does that mean they left all the fish? Like all of the fish that they just caught? It says they left everything and then they followed him. This is crazy to me because what they thought they were after, God wanted so much more. They were fishing at night trying to catch fish. And because Jesus showed up in their boat and Peter actually responded in who he was, they caught an overwhelming amount. He invited others to join them, James and John. And then because of that, because of Peter recognizing his sin, others got involved. And then they left. And then they you ready for this one? Okay, so watch. It says this. So then they what? They go back into the boat and then they leave. So Peter, James, and John, they begin to follow Jesus. That's Jesus, guys. I don't know, I have a whole story here on how James and John actually developed as disciples. I have no time for this. So I want to just close with Darrell Bock's quote. I think this is really cool about how when you spend time in the boat and Jesus speaks to us and Peter responds, God's going to overwhelm us with His blessings. As He overwhelms us with His blessings, then we actually realize who we are in our sinful state. But then when we realize who Christ is, then others will say, I want that. And this is what Darrell Bock says. He says, what Peter doesn't realize is that admitting one's inability and sin is actually the best prerequisite for service. So by him saying, whoa, I am a sinful man, he's actually now saying, now you can use me. Since then, one can depend upon God when we actually recognize who we are. And Peter's confession actually becomes his resume for service. By Peter saying, I am, what? Unclean, he then says, good, now you can use me. And humility becomes the elevator, and I love what Bach says, to spiritual greatness. By hanging out on a boat, realizing they can't do this, and then understanding what he asks us to do, because of humility, I wish the church would get this. Humility is the only way to greatness. We want to catch the fish ourselves so everybody can say, look at them, look at what they did. But the reality is, no. It's when we say we can't catch the fish. That's when he begins to use us. This is Luke 5. Kind of a fun story for me because it's so practical. Keep going, guys. Keep going, because Jesus will honor you in what you're doing when you serve Him. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.